mo lẹ́nìkan tí wọ́n mi tèmi kò rí onìkan lólùbẹ̀wò ayé mi àti lọ àti bọ̀ mi lọ́wọ́ rẹ̀ lọ́wọ́ bí mo ṣe búburú tàbí mo ṣe rere ẹ̀rí ọkàn mi máa lò fẹ́lẹ́ yíyan ẹ̀rí ọkàn mi jọ̀wọ́ dá mi láre. mo lẹ́nìkan tí mo mi tèmi kò rí onìkan lólùbẹ̀wò ayé mi àti lọ àti bọ̀ mi lọ́wọ́ rẹ̀ lọ́wọ́ bí mo ṣe búburú tàbí mo ṣe rere ẹ̀rí ọkàn mi máa lò fẹ́lẹ́ yíyan ẹ̀rí ọkàn mi jọ̀wọ́ dá mi láre. jíjí tí mo jí mo gbọ́ nǹkan létí mi mo gbọ́ nǹkan tí ń pè ó ṣe ajé èpè mi mo gbọ́ ajé o ajé rèé o ajé màmí wá mi bọ̀ mo ṣílẹ̀kùn mi sílẹ̀ o ilé mi ní òyà o. jíjí tí mo jí mo gbọ́ nǹkan létí mi mo gbọ́ nǹkan tí ń gbé ó ṣe ajé pè mí mo gbọ́ ajé o ajé rèé o ajé màmí wá mi bọ̀ mo ṣílẹ̀kùn mi sílẹ̀ o ilé mi ní òyà o. mo lọ́rẹ́ kan tí mo ní tèmi kò rí. mo lọ́rẹ́ kan tí mo ní tèmi kò rí. bí mo ṣe mú mi bí mo ṣe sọ̀rọ̀ bí mo ṣe lọ bí mo ṣe bọ̀ òjijì ayé wa gbogbo ohun tá a ṣe. ayé wa òjijì ayé wa bẹ̀rẹ̀ ohun tá a ṣe. Òjìji ayé wa bẹ̀rẹ̀ ohun tá a ṣe. Bàbá ka mímọ́ wọn nínú oníṣẹ́ rẹ̀. Bàbá ka mímọ́ wọn nínú oníṣẹ́ rẹ̀. Má jẹ́ kú kí n tó kú, má jẹ́ faragbà òwe. Má jẹ́ kú kí n tó kú, má jẹ́ faragbà òwe. Má jẹ́ bá wọn lòdò láìpọ́n ní Èdùmàrè ṣe mí láṣẹ lé. Bàbá ka mímọ́ wọn nínú oníṣẹ́ rẹ̀. Bàbá ka mímọ́ wọn nínú oníṣẹ́ rẹ̀. Má jẹ́ kú kí n tó kú, má jẹ́ faragbà òwe. Má jẹ́ kú kí n tó kú, má jẹ́ faragbà òwe. Má jẹ́ bá wọn lòdò láìpọ́n ní Èdùmàrè ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Bàbá ka mímọ́ wọn nínú oníṣẹ́ rẹ̀. Bàbá ka mímọ́ wọn nínú oníṣẹ́ rẹ̀. Má jẹ́ kú kí n tó kú, má jẹ́ faragbà òwe. Má jẹ́ kú kí n tó kú, má jẹ́ faragbà òwe. Má jẹ́ bá wọn lòdò láìpọ́n ní Èdùmàrè ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Má jẹ́ bá wọn lòdò láìpọ́n ní ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Bàbá mọ kẹ́pẹ́ àwọn dá mi lóhùn ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Ṣe mí láṣẹ pé, ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Bàbá mọ kẹ́pẹ́ àwọn dá mi lóhùn ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Ṣe mí láṣẹ pé, ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Bàbá mọ kẹ́pẹ́ àwọn dá mi lóhùn ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Ṣe mí láṣẹ pé, ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Bàbá mọ kẹ́pẹ́ àwọn dá mi lóhùn ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Ṣe mí láṣẹ pé, ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Bàbá mọ kẹ́pẹ́ àwọn dá mi lóhùn ṣe mí láṣẹ pé. Bàbá ka mímọ́ wọn nínú oníṣẹ́ rẹ̀. Bàbá ka mímọ́ wọn nínú oníṣẹ́ rẹ̀. Má jẹ́ kú kí n tó kú, má jẹ́ faragbà òwe. Má jẹ́ kú kí n tó kú, má jẹ́ faragbà òwe. Má jẹ́ bá wọn lòdò láìpọ́n ní Èdùmàrè ṣe mí láṣẹ pé.
Yes, but yes. Let me see. Let's see how we're gonna start it off today. Honestly, as y'all can see, random stream. Oops, random stream. Really just because I just got this new webcam. and I really want to see how it works. We are trying to color mind 2026. We are it's the cornbread color mind takeover. I feel like it's our time. Shout out to everybody that watched the last video. Actually, maybe we should start with that while I wait for some more people to trickle in. Why is this on my side channel? Let's see. Let's go to color mind. Wait, don't move the chat. I need to see the chat. Chat over here. Then that means really quickly, if I then want to add there you go. Okay. I'm gonna add a widget. Should we just let me see the widget? We'll make it this thing. Chat. Chat box. Okay. And now that is also over here. But yeah. Yeah, thank you guys for watching the last video. It's you know, it's been doing well. I'm not gonna show y'all my analytics. Y'all not that special. But I appreciate the love. Even though technically my output did double from 2024, I also respect that I did put out single digit videos this year. So it is nice, even as a like small channel low-key, right? I can still do a video on a boring ass subject like the economy, or like on some niche economic term, and still almost get 20K in like less than 2 weeks. So that's making me feel proud. I want to give myself my flowers for that. Who the hell is calling me? It's probably another bot. But anyway. I feel like I guess the first thing we have to start with, just so the thumbnail or just so this title makes fucking sense, is the fact that yeah, we're colonizing again. I mean, we never stopped, right? Obviously, but it's where wow, almost just docked the fuck up myself. What I meant to do is. Should be yeah, we're colonizing again. What the hell did I say? We're colonizing again. Venezuela. I guess we gotta find out what the fuck is happening over there, don't we? Oh, D'Angelo's oh yeah, see, if there's a white man I trust about this, it's UNFTR media. If you see this, let's work.
Captured President Nicolas Maduro, along with his wife Celia Flores, who are reportedly being taken to Manhattan to face criminal charges for drug.
I remember what I want to do now. I can like hear myself and oh, sorry, I definitely hit the wrong thing, you guys. I muted myself. That's better. Okay. Let's watch this video from UNFTR on Maduro's capture, because what the fuck? Like honestly, like we're like, are we really just we're running back the exact 2002 playbook with WMDs, just calling it we're not even hiding it this time either, right? Like, I don't even know what the excuse is this time. Right, we're just literally running the Iraq playbook again. Make it make sense. I'm gonna change the. Can I change the? Like, that color is atrocious. That's better. But how do I change the text color? We're gonna go ahead and make you. Yeah, I guess we'll look at red. That's somehow even worse, guys. I'm not. My name is Colormine. I'm not a color theorist. Okay, no, we gonna get this though. Boop, boop. It's gonna make it yellow. Yellow never really does me wrong. Nice. Also, username checks out. Pissed off, Christoph. Exactly. Like, I think the thing I'm most afraid of, perhaps, is that America has learned nothing. And that somehow they will. I mean, we can't have learned nothing, right? There's no way we could have learned nothing from Iraq. So I guess that's why it feels more like almost like an extinction burst type activity, if anybody knows what that means. Like an extinction burst is I forgot where I learned it. I think it was I'm not gonna lie, I think it was on like Instagram or some shit. But is this idea that right before like something dies out, there's like this one last burst of energy to like, you know, stop it from happening. And I think low-key basically trying to pretend it's still the 20th century and we can just go and invade and colonize other countries and that's just going to be cool with the wider community is a type of extinction burst activity that kind of lets you know that even I believe on the GOP side, they under oh, I didn't know that'll do like a Zoom thing for me, but they understand they're on the way out. They understand that they lost, and I guess they're just content to go out swinging. I'm not gonna hold you guys. I love this camera. I look fine as hell on this camera. Ooh, follow me, yes, baby. I'm sorry. Y'all need to hear me say that. I'm wild for this title, but hey, you wild for clicking it, ain't you? You wild hooded one, because now this is your algorithm. Now you built this algorithm brick by brick. Yeah, you did. Nope, you did. Okay. Anyway, let's watch this. Wait, hold on. We gotta hit my favorite part.
Early this morning, the United States carried out a special operation strike in Caracas, Venezuela, and captured President Nicolas Maduro, along with his wife Celia Flores, who were reportedly being taken to Manhattan to face criminal charges for drug trafficking. Now, according to Venezuela and U.S. sources, the strikes hit military sites, but the U.S. military coordinated with CIA operatives who had knowledge of Maduro's whereabouts, which led to his capture. So we have to be extremely clear about what this portends because we have officially crossed the Rubicon on this one. Now, I think we're all pretty clear on the notion that this wasn't about drugs. So we're going to talk about what this is really about. Look at the justifications that are coming from the White House and from the mainstream media and explain why this might.
Oh, right. That's what it's like. It's supposed to be about drugs, which don't even, the type of drugs we're worried about don't even come from fucking Venezuela. But, okay.
Be the most illegal thing the United States has done since Kissinger's secret bombing campaign in Cambodia.
UNFTR. Honest to God, that is my favorite part of this fucking show. That's my favorite part of the fucking show.
All right, so
I mean, also like the knowledge and shit, and like the very leftist and like intellectual, entertaining way that I believe his name is Max. I keep like trying to avoid it because I don't want to give my man's name wrong because I really respect what he does. But highly recommend that you guys check out the show or this channel, UNFTR, Unfucking the Republic.
Let's start by addressing what's already happening across mainstream media. The whataboutisms have already begun. The major news outlets are all trotting out their usual suspects, the professional pundit class on speed dial, to tell you why this is all justified. And if you're a Fox viewer, why you should feel terrific about what just happened. I mean, they're talking about how Maduro was deeply unpopular, a terrible economic manager, a ruthless dictator who rigged elections and jailed dissidents. All true. Maduro presided over an economic catastrophe. Partially our fault, but it was a catastrophe nonetheless. He's authoritarian. He suppressed opposition, but none of that matters, not in what we're talking about right now, because we're being asked to accept a whataboutism that completely obfuscates the primary issue here. This was an illegal, unconstitutional, unprovoked international war crime, the likes of which we haven't seen in a very long time. So let me be absolutely clear about what happened.
Like, be so fucking for real right now. Like, they did a GTA mission on a whole country. They really said, grab 3 oil tankers and then assume. No, like, actually, though. Like, they really said, obtain 3 to 4 oil tankers and then disrupt a third world country. 5,000 XP, I've never played GTA, I'm not gonna hold you. But, like, I don't know, 10K payout. Like, this is, this would be so much more funny if it wasn't real.
The United States military, without a declaration of war, without congressional authorization, without UN Security Council approval, without any legal framework whatsoever, bombed the capital city of a sovereign nation and kidnapped its head of state. Full stop. And already I'm watching cable news glaze the military, talking about precision strikes, stealth operations, our brave men and women in uniform, all of these superlatives designed to whitewash the fact that we just literally kidnapped a democratically elected world leader and we're flying him to New York to face charges in a legal system he never consented to. Now, before you jump
on charges that don't exist, like, what is going on? We kidnapped, like, yeah, he was and the crazy part is that he was still an illegitimate president. Like, from the very, wait, I just want to make sure. Okay, yeah, from the very scant research that I had already done before this live, like, him winning was like contested or something, or the votes ain't make no sense. But like, I don't. It's literally like no Lil Uzi, but it's literally my 3rd day out here, and this is what the fuck we're doing.
In with, oh, but Venezuelan elections aren't legitimate. Yeah, I get it. They have serious integrity issues. But let's not go down the road of comparing election integrity among supposed democratic nations, because we're still currently partnered with Saudi Arabia, an absolute monarchy that doesn't even hold elections. We prop up dictators across the world who suspend elections and constitutions whenever it suits us. We've recognized coups that overthrew democratically elected leaders when the outcome served our interests. And given our own recent history with election challenges and lawsuits and Jan 6, maybe we shouldn't be throwing stones from inside this particular glass house. Now, the professional pundit class wants you to focus on Maduro's sins to justify this action, but don't fall for it. Any take that you see that offers a whataboutism on Maduro should be ignored completely because it distracts from the central point, that this is unprecedented. And I hate that word because it's so overused, but it genuinely applies here. You would have to go back to the CIA-backed coup that overthrew Salvador Allende in Chile in 1973 and installed the dictatorial regime of Augusto Pinochet to come close to this level of intervention. Or, yes, Kissinger's secret bombing campaign in Cambodia, operations conducted completely outside of congressional authority that led to hundreds of thousands of deaths. I even saw a pundit try to draw parallels to Nicaragua in 1989, but that doesn't work either. Yes, the U.S. spent a decade destabilizing the Sandinista government through the Contras, economic embargoes and diplomatic pressure that eventually led to the electoral defeat in 1990. And yes, the Iran-Contra scandal was one of the biggest political disasters in American history. But even that involved covert back-channel dealings over years. It wasn't a direct military assault on a capital city followed by the abduction of a sitting president. This is more brazen than anything we've done since the early 20th century, when Theodore Roosevelt was invoking the Roosevelt corollary and literally saying, we'll discipline Latin American countries ourselves if they step out of line. So let's apply the logic of the Trump administration to any other situation.
You know what? And you know what I just said about that extinction burst activity? In a way, Trump attempting to take the U.S. back to this Brennan Hall, Big Brother U.S. Like Uncle Sam, Big Brother dynamic, or like spot that the U.S. used to occupy, where like, oh, like where we see injustice, we will be the policeman of the world, is in and of itself a like antiquated notion, because America hasn't done that since we failed in Iraq, since we failed in Vietnam. To keep it a buck with you, right? Like we've broken the facade of being Superman decades ago, and we're at the point where the BRICS nations, where for better or for often for worse, I'm not a supporter of like AFRICOM, but like even in the African Union, they're trying to protect themselves from America. Nobody wants America's help. So even this pretense of America the Liberator is, I think it's plain to see that it's a cover, or I want to say, yeah, it's a very lame attempt at trying to make America great again by putting it back in its like World War II light, I guess. Oh my God, facts. Imagine if Xi Jinping or Putin kidnapped Trump and put him on trial. I mean, to be honest with you, what could we do? You know, it's their government, their proceedings. You know, they're crazy. Like, that'd be the most tense situation ever if you're a Republican, because you really have to be like, are we gonna go to war? Because they kidnapped our president, and then 60% of the country would have been like, I don't know, bro. Do they just want Trump? Is that it? They don't want no oil. They don't want no job. They just want Trump. And Melania? We could negotiate Melania. She had nothing to do with this.
The United States has been charged with crimes in the International Court of Justice multiple times. We've been accused of war crimes by numerous countries and international bodies as well. But we don't recognize any of these courts or their jurisdiction. But using the precedent that we just set, any of these countries would now have the same standing to bomb Washington, D.C., to fly into the Capitol with special forces, capture Donald and Melania, and spirit them away for trial at The Hague or wherever they see fit. Does that sound absurd? Yeah.
It does sound absurd. It sounds Game of Thrones. Like, it sounds like the people in this administration really fucked with Game of Thrones and was like, yeah, now that's how it needs to be. If we need to get some motion happening, man, fuck all this diplomacy matter. Fuck all this thinking about consequences and long-term initiatives. Let's just kidnap a princess. Then we have leverage. And hey, I learned in business school, the only thing you ever fucking need is leverage.
Because it's absurd. It's a flagrant.
Oh, right. I put in this to be like, I'm sorry. So somebody put the Kiki meme. I'm sorry to this man, but I do not know.
Violation of international law, It's a violation of the UN Charter. It's a violation of every norm that's existed since World War II about how nations should interact with one another. And I've already seen coverage of Venezuelans here in the United States and in Caracas being interviewed saying Maduro was ruthless and incompetent and he shouldn't be in power. But flip the script for a second. If another country did that to the United States, what we just did to Venezuela, if they bombed D.C. and kidnapped Trump, there are at least 150 million Americans who would give you the exact same soundbite. You'd be like, he was incompetent, shouldn't have been in power. Good riddance. Does that justify it? Of course not. Because domestic unpopularity is not a license for foreign military invention and kidnapping. All of this, every bit of media coverage focused on Maduro's failings is designed to distract from the point. This action is illegal under both U.S. and international law. It's incredibly dangerous. It sets a precedent that essentially says might makes right, and any powerful nation can simply grab the leaders of weaker nations whenever they feel like it. So what is this really about?
I feel like what's even more dangerous about this is that we remember when we cared more about Project 2025 and them actually implementing it instead of now how we just watch them just do it bit by bit. A key part of returning America to its greatness was somehow making sure it was more isolationist. There's this resentment on the conservative side, even though they are the party of warhawks, that America is in everybody's business too much, and everybody relies on America to clean up its messes. And what's the best way to what's the best way to keep to yourself in a globalized economy where everybody is connected to one another, because we've already figured out it's better if everybody has some skin in the game? Well, why don't you just make enemies out of your allies? Why don't you just put needless tariffs on anyone, even islands that have fucking penguins on them? Why not kidnap the president of another fucking country just to put everybody else that's in your allyship, that's been in your allyship for decades, in a tough spot, and possibly make them say, you know what, America is tweaking right now. America's going through some things. Actually, maybe we don't want to be so friendly with America. Maybe we might even start being adversarial. And now you have the excuse to start a war, to say everybody's against us. It's time for America to be Rome, or whatever the fuck white men think about.
Because this isn't about justice or democracy or any of the noble rhetoric that we're going to hear from Trump. So let me lay out the theories that are being floated. Is this about oil? Drugs? Maybe a distraction from the Epstein files because Venezuela was such an easy target? Well, in order, the answers are a little, no, and stop. But there's another element that we've covered before on this show that needs to be explained again because it's already getting lost in the noise. So let's break down each.
Not Mexico. I thought he respected her. I thought because she was legitimately elected. I thought
each theory starting with oil. It is fair to say that in the past, we have spilled blood for oil. That was pretty much the pretense for the Iraq War. But does the same pretense hold true for Venezuela? Because Venezuelan oil is not like American oil. Venezuela produces mostly heavy, sour crude, extra heavy oil from the Orinoco Belt. It's thick, it's contaminated with metals, and it's very expensive to process. So their main export blend is a heavy crude, but to make it exportable, they have to blend it with a light crude. So compare that to U.S. oil. Our benchmark WTI, or West Texas Intermediate, and most of the shale output from places like the Permian and the Bakken are light, sweet crudes that are easier and cheaper to refine into gasoline. So why does Venezuelan oil matter at all? Well, there is a case. Because U.S. refineries, especially in the Gulf Coast, were historically built to optimize and process heavy sour crude. They were designed to take imports from places like Venezuela, Mexico, and even the Middle East, and to blend them with our domestic light sweet crude. So these complex refineries are specifically configured to handle this nastier oil and turn it into things like diesel and industrial fuels. So Venezuelan crude is technically valuable to some refineries, even though it's lower quality on paper. So the two types of oil, heavy sour and light sweet, are complements, not substitutes. So we can make it.
Don't know why we need to name them like alcohols, but like just to sort of, I mean, I paused this, so I might as well just summarize from my own understanding as well. But basically, it seems like America, once again, going back to the making America great again, right? In a back in the peak of the oil era, America seemed to have had the infrastructure set up in its other colonies to take lower tier oil and like refine it into more usable oil. Like we already had a place that specifically could take lower grade this sour oil and refine it into diesel. Mind you, why go into this strategy when we know that oil is on its way out and that fossil fuels are not the future? I'm not really quite sure. Christopher Columbus in 1492. Like this is clear. Like we all know this is a play for oil. There's a more naked play for oil than even O2, right? In which they at least made up the idea that there was something dangerous there, and then whoops, we found oil. I guess we're gonna have that up now. No, they were like, we're there for the oil, and also, bro, management fucked up in there anyway, so we're just gonna manage that until they get their stuff together, you know, out of the goodness of our hearts.
Case, but here's the thing. After years of U.S. sanctions, Venezuela has been shipping its oil to other countries with refineries that can also handle it, namely India and China. And here's where things get interesting. So, unbelievable timing here. Just yesterday, we released a piece about a new strategy unveiled by the BRICS Alliance. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, along with some other entrants like Ethiopia, Egypt, and Indonesia, about a payment system that factors directly into what we're talking about today. Just this past December, just a few weeks ago, the BRICS Alliance announced an international payment system based on a new digital currency called the unit. So this represents a direct...
Man, see, socialist nations, collectivist nations, even like have better naming conventions. Like our version, and he's probably about to explain it, but like our international cash payment is called the SWIFT payment, and like I know it's probably an acronym for some shit, but like the unit, be like, oh nah, we don't use just any old currency, you know. Around here we use the unit. You feel me? The unit.
Challenge to US dollar hegemony. Not immediately, but someday. But the more immediate concern is that if they perfect this system over the year, BRICS countries could theoretically start paying for oil with units instead of petrodollars. This is a massive problem for the United States. Again, not because we need Venezuelan oil. We are the largest producer of oil in the world right now. Chevron still does business in Venezuela as it is, by the way.
And by the way, we're not us being the largest oil producer of the world is not necessarily because, oh, we got so much oil and like we're basking in it in Saudi Arabia, right? That is certainly like we have been blessed geographically with oil deposits, but it's also because the rest of the world has fucking eyes, and they're moving away from fossil fuels, from oil, into more renewable forms of energy. We are not even behind the ball. We're choosing to backtrack to put ourselves behind.
ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips would probably like to someday resume operations there after they were kicked out during Chavez's nationalization. But would we really risk overthrowing an entire government just to put 2 U.S. companies back in business, especially when oil's trading below $60? So even if these companies wanted back in, they're not going to invest the capital right now. Trump just put us into a global recession with tariff wars, so oil companies are pulling back on new investments right now. They're not even exploring open leases in the United States, let alone trying to reclaim operations in a country that we've completely destabilized through sanctions. So anyone telling you that this is about the U.S. taking the oil doesn't understand the dynamics here. The oil story is about maintaining the petrodollar system. It's about making sure that oil continues to be traded in US dollars, which creates demand for our currency and helps us sell the treasury bonds that we desperately need to fund our massive deficits.
Like I was saying, it's all about maintaining the United States as it's trying to force the world to stay in the status quo where the United States is the status quo.
It's not about putting more money in ExxonMobil's pockets. It's about ensuring continued demand for dollars in global energy markets. Because if Venezuela, and more importantly, oil producers in the BRICS nations shift to BRICS payments or currency that isn't dollar-backed, it undermines the entire structure that allows the U.S. to run trillion-dollar deficits without immediate consequences. And we know it's not about drugs. Our own intelligence agencies have verified that the limited amount of drug trafficking coming from Venezuela is in cocaine, and most of that is going to Europe. The overwhelming majority of drugs entering the United States comes through Mexico. It's fentanyl and fentanyl precursors from China that are processed in Mexican labs and smuggled across the southern border. So if this was actually about narco-terrorism, we'd be invading Mexico or launching strikes on Chinese pharmaceutical companies. This whole narco state accusation is just a justification that we trot out whenever we want.
But Max, that's where all our stuff comes from. How? Why would I bomb my Ross and my 7-Eleven?
To intervene somewhere, but need
and basically all my infrastructure projects.
A reason that
and my agriculture
sounds tough on crime and plays well domestically. It's propaganda, pure and simple. So as far as this being a distraction from the Epstein files, look, I think there's a small side benefit for Trump, but anyone who suggests that this is the primary motivation is missing the big picture. Trump does love his distractions, but you don't launch a military operation of this scale just to change the news cycle. There are much easier ways to do that. So the biggest reason that I guarantee that you're not going to hear from the mainstream is that, yes, it's about oil, but not directly. It's about payments for oil and standing up the petrodollar, getting ahead of the fact that the BRICS nations, the biggest of which are now the primary recipients of Venezuelan heavy sour crude, just launched a mechanism to get around the petrodollar. But there's another angle that you also won't hear about: Cuba. And to contextualize this idea, we have to explain the relationship between Venezuela and Cuba. These two countries have been joined at the hip ever since Hugo Chavez came to power in 1998, united by what they call the Bolivarian Revolution, a shared ideological project of resistance to U.S. imperialism and economic self-determination. So let's rewind to the 1990s. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Cuba lost its primary benefactor, and the result for them was catastrophic. Cuba entered what Fidel Castro called the special period. It was a decade of severe food and fuel shortages, economic contraction, and genuine suffering for ordinary Cubans. The United States, sensing an opportunity to finally topple the Castro regime, doubled down with the Helms-Burton Act in 1996, which tightened the embargo and prohibited foreign companies from doing business with Cuba. So after decades of failed assassination attempts and efforts to foment internal revolution, American policymakers thought that this was finally it. The Cuban Revolution would collapse under its own weight. But then Hugo Chavez won the Venezuelan presidency in 1998, and everything changed. Chavez and Castro formed an immediate bond. They shared ideologies, enemies, and visions. See, for Castro, Chavez represented one of the last champions of Cuban-inspired revolutionary movements in Latin America. And for Chavez, Castro was a mentor. He was a symbol of resistance and a model for how to maintain power against overwhelming U.S. pressure. And the relationship wasn't just symbolic. It was profoundly practical. See, Venezuela needed expertise in healthcare, education, and security. Cuba needed oil and hard currency as well. So they made a deal. Venezuela would.
So if I'm understanding this if I'm understanding this right, Cuba and Venezuela becomes allies with Cuba during while it's in an antagonistic relationship with the U.S. By antagonistic, I of course mean that the U.S. don't want to see a real nigga win. And because, I guess because Venezuela becomes has a revolution and becomes another successful non-capitalist nation that Cuba can align itself with, it actually offers a lifeboat to. Oh my god, I'm about to. Oh wait, okay. I already thought it's just because of the white thing, y'all. I'm actually not actually. Okay. Yeah. Cuba was America was hoping that Cuba was going to fall in on itself after the revolution, but because it was able to ally with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, they actually finally had a friend that is in a desperate need because they had lost the Soviet Union, which was their biggest benefactor. Somebody tell me if I got that right, or if you guys understand. I'm watching this video at the first time as you guys.
Provide Cuba with heavily subsidized oil at its peak 105,000 barrels a day, basically for free or at a deeply discounted rate. And in exchange, Cuba would send doctors, teachers, intelligence officers, and military advisors to Venezuela. This exchange saved Cuba's economy. Venezuelan oil pulled Cuba out of the special period and gave the
Venezuela had oil.
Communist Party a lifeline that it desperately needed. So between 2000 and 2018, over 219,000 Cuban professionals served in Venezuela. This is why the Cuba-Venezuela relationship is central to understanding what just happened. See, for over 6 decades, the United States has tried to overthrow the Cuban government and undo the Castro revolution, even after Castro died. We've tried everything. The Bay of Pigs invasion, multiple assassination attempts against Fidel Castro, crippling embargoes, diplomatic isolation. Nothing worked. The Communist Party in Cuba has survived every attempt to dislodge it. But if we can topple Venezuela, we can cut off Cuba's economic lifeline. So if we strangle the Cuban economy by taking away the oil and cash it needs to survive, we get 2 regime changes for the price of 1. And this brings us to little Marco Rubio, Trump's Secretary of State, who is absolutely central to this entire operation. Rubio is Cuban American. His parents emigrated from Cuba, and like many in the Cuban exile community, especially in Florida, he carries deep personal generational hostility toward the Castro regime, the revolution, and everything that it represents. So this isn't just politics for Rubio. This is about this system that they blame for forcing generations, and their family in particular, into exile, and a 6-decade promise.
So I guess not a coon, right? Because I guess, did that mean his family was one of the people that were the elites during the revolution? So that's why they got ousted. I really quickly want to address what Hooded said here about why weaken the U.S. position in the world with tariffs and then attack another nation to strengthen the dollar. I know they've already, you've already added the concept of, like, he likes to come in with things with a hammer, break it, and then get some tape and then say that he fixed the thing that he broke. And it is kind of like that, right? It is it's much more straightforward to think of this as he thought the tariffs for some fucking reason were going to work because he thought this was the 1940s, and because people did not respond to the tariffs. If you think about it like poker, right? The tariffs are kind of like, the tariffs are a bluff, right? They're raising the stakes, and everyone called that raise. They matched his energy by saying, cool, we're either tariffing or we're finding other people. Like, we could give a fuck about whether or not we get things primarily from the US, to be honest with you. And because of that, now Trump initially put on the back foot, right? Because now he's put the tariffs, he can't take them back because it'll be the sign. He can't apologize for the tariffs because that'll be a sign of weakness. And so he's got to honestly start playing the game that everybody else is now playing, that he's forced us to now play, which is I need to make sure we have our own vertical integration. We have to make sure we can get resources from, especially like not only rare earth minerals but natural resources. That's what I'm trying to say. From the countries from outside of the countries that we're now not allied with.
That one day the revolution will be undone. Rubio has been one of the most vocal advocates for crushing Venezuela for a decade. He's been pushing for regime change, for harsher sanctions, for anything that would destabilize that government. And his motive,
like low-key, like this is supposed to be like a music stream, but now I'm like, if y'all down for the ride, I'm like, we might need to do a little Cuba deep dive, just so everybody's like up to speed, because I have a good video in mind. But yeah, keep in mind, before Castro, the leader Batista was literally an American puppet, I think similar to Pinochet, right? Who basically was just there to destabilize the entire fucking country.
Motivation has been totally transparent. If you topple Venezuela, then you finally deliver the death blow to Cuba. And then we have Maria Corina Machado, the woman who recently won the Nobel Peace Prize for her opposition activism against Maduro. Now, this is a complete sham of an award because, Kissinger won it, for God's sake. They gave it to Obama before he was president. And then he went on a 8-year tear, bombing 7 countries we weren't even at war with.
Yeah, bro.
And so we know it's a sham because Machado herself said that Donald Trump should have won it instead. This tells you everything that you need to know about the political forces behind that award, but also what's happening today. And the number one promoter of Maria Machado to receive the Nobel Prize? Marco Rubio. Because Machado represents the Venezuelan opposition that aligned with U.S. corporate interests, the opposition that wants to return to the neoliberal policies of the 80s and 90s that enriched a tiny elite while leaving the majority in desperate poverty. See, Machado's not a champion of democracy in any meaningful sense. She's a champion of the old economic order that Hugo Chavez overthrew, the order that treated Venezuela as an extraction zone for foreign capital. And this gets to the heart of the Cuban-American politics in Florida, which has been one of the most reliably Republican voting blocs in the country for decades. Why? Because they fundamentally oppose any normalization of relations with Cuba until the Communist Party is destroyed.
And I think this breaks a lot of like white people or even normie people's heads, right? Because they are, even though they act like they don't subscribe to it, but they're actually stuck super deep in the sunken place of identity politics. And they truly believe that because a person is Cuban, of course, that means they align with whatever that current nation is now. And that is, and that is in and of itself a phenomenon of of immigrant culture, and that I think has been talked before. In the other direction, in which my parents immigrated here from Nigeria. My dad immigrated here in the 70s, late 70s, and my mom immigrated in the 90s. And the way they feel about Nigeria is actually quite conservative to what Nigeria is now, because, well, they haven't lived there. My dad's lived outside of Nigeria longer than he's lived in Nigeria at this point in his life. And I think my mom is the same way. So context is always super important when you consider someone's nationality or someone's identity, because it makes a lot of sense that the Cubans, when you look at history, that the Cubans that ended up fleeing or being exiled from Cuba are the ones that, well, if you look at Cuba now, yeah, they're you gotta determine how much you like Cuba now to understand why they might not like why they liked Cuba then and why they don't like Cuba now, right? Ooh, thank you, Spinoli. Excellent book for a miseducated U.S. citizen, like a lot of us, like me as well. That's why we're going to do apparently we're doing this deep dive today, so I'm excited. Cuba and American Life History by Ada Ferrer. I'm favoriting that.
So crippling Venezuela will plunge Cuba into chaos not seen since the special period. But here's the difference. Today, there's no Fidel Castro. There's no charismatic revolutionary leader who commanded respect and can hold the country together through sheer force of personality. The current Cuban leadership is technocratic and uninspiring. So without Venezuelan oil, without economic support, Cuba could genuinely collapse this time. And that's what Rubio is banking on. Once Cuba's on its knees, he can gin up a justification to invade there as well and install another U.S.-friendly regime and finally deliver on the promise to his political base. And now we have Machado licking her chops, thinking she's just going to waltz into Caracas and take over as president, as if it's that simple. But let me give you a parallel. Imagine Iran unilaterally acted on one of their ICJ cases and bombed D.C., kidnapped Donald Trump, and announced that they were installing their preferred candidate in the White House. I mean, J.D. Vance would be standing there like, what exactly is happening here? Right? There would be absolute chaos. There would be competing claims to power. There would be violence. That's what's about to happen in Venezuela. The U.S. just decapitated the head of the government, but there's still an entire political and military apparatus in place. Maduro's allies, the Venezuelan military, the Cuban advisors, regional powers like Colombia and Brazil, none of them are just going to accept Machado walking in and taking over because the United States said so. But as usual, the U.S. just assumed that the next part would be easy. We topple the bad guy, install our preferred government. Everyone lines up and thanks us for bringing freedom and democracy. How many times have we made this mistake? Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. It just never works out. It just never works out in the way we think it will. And this way won't be easy either, because it never is. So let's put it all together. It's not about drugs. The whole narco-terrorism narrative is propaganda, plain and simple. This really isn't about oil in the sense of acquiring petroleum resources because we're the largest producer. We don't need Venezuelan crude. This is, though, about the petrodollar. It's about maintaining dollar dominance in global oil markets at a time when the BRICS alliance is actively building alternative payment systems. It's about making sure that oil continues to be traded in dollars so that we can keep selling treasury bonds to fund our deficits. And the biggest side benefit is Cuba. It's about Marco Rubio settling a score. And now, because of this illegal military action, because of this brazen violation of international law, we've set a precedent that might makes right. The powerful countries can just bomb and kidnap the leader of weaker countries whenever they decide the time is right. So please reject the whataboutisms and realize that we have crossed the Rubicon. And make sure to check out the piece that we just dropped about the BRICS unit for more context on the petrodollar issue. And of course, sign up for our free weekly news.
Like, not to take it there, but how in sentiment, not in details and maybe in context per se, but because I don't know all the details, but in sentiment, how much different is this from a certain German head of state, chancellor, invading Poland or invading Czechoslovakia? Like, y'all tell me if I'm tripping. Like, but this idea of a country just recklessly going into a smaller, weaker country, thinking that, you know, no one should really give a damn about it just to see if they could. I don't know. That just rings kind of true to me. Like, we really just finished an occupation to start another one, as if like it's the next season of Stranger Things. Like, I'm so sick of shit here. Okay. I got this Cuba video that I want to show you guys. Oh my god, what the hell was the name of it? I feel like I have it on one of my playlists. Which means I'm gonna go to the default screen so you guys can't see me. Okay. No, because every time I need to like reload the thing, that's gonna be so annoying. Boom. You. Yeah, bro, where's my... This should always be here. I think this is chat. Let me go find this video. Is this one? Maybe this one. Some it's like I don't know if this is. Oh no, it's okay. It's a chat bot. Okay. Shout out to the 22 people in chat. 23. You know, we're looking good. Happy New Year once again to you guys. You know, it's Saturday, so this isn't technically a Tile Tuesday. On Tuesdays, we will really be doing music. I'ma just be making beats just like for the channel. You know, I usually say it on lives, and if you're around, then you probably know. But I, for the most part, like make at least all the music that you like on the channel. Like I, for the most part, make it. Can y'all hear that? Actually, let me try this. Oh, very awkward time to be coming from Germany, but Happy New Year to you as well. Let me see if I can turn on my caster if you guys all go here. Give me a mic check on that. Can y'all sound coming through? All right, I don't like that. Oh, hold on. I might get dangerous. It might get dangerous if y'all can hear the guitar, because that means Wonderwall could be coming. Y'all would never know. And really, this is because I'm waiting for my goddamn video to load. What else I know? How does song go? Don't think you heard about me. It's the Saunders song. Don't think you care about me. Oh, girl, I care about you, but you don't care about nobody but you. Bro, it's good. I bought big boy internet for the first time. I know I'm all over the place. It's ADHD scream. Y'all know how it is. Oh, stop. Now I'm the main character of the video. Yes, I am the color mind. You know, I do a little bit of this, do a little of that. Welcome to the stream. Thank you. We will get more of them. It's part of a series called Going Concern. If you're interested in that, the video that we made before that is if somebody could link it in the chat, but it's a game theory video on the stag hunt and the prisoner's dilemma, in which we talk about those two things. I was supposed to do a live, like responding to the comments that I got on that video actually, because the feedback was good. Feedback was interesting. The feedback was good. I realized I'm now officially breaking into that economics econ bro space, and like that means that I gotta prepare for some neckbeards coming at me with the bullshit. But I'm gonna let y'all know right now, I'm not y'all. I don't play games. Try Jesus. Don't try me. The shit's not coming up. That's actually insane. Play the ballot emoji. Play the ballot emoji. Send me tabs. I got you. Okay. There we go. What the hell? Okay, no, it's like just don't want to play it. That's interesting. Okay, yeah. Cuba. You know what? Yeah. I guess we're just Cuba explained. Trapaholics. Trapaholics on an acoustic guitar is crazy. Like what is that? That's Trapaholics. Damn son, where'd you find this? Listen, one thing, well, how long I've been in this game now? I've been making a video for 3 years. I really done finally understood how I understood what y'all need to hear. I'm understanding the algorithm. Here we go. Got it. Overzealots. Okay.
When you search Che Guevara on YouTube, you'll be greeted with an overwhelming amount.
Let me print this up. Go to my React screen. I fuck with this program. Shout out to a foreign man to foreign land one time. He put me on this eCam shit. I like it. So right now we're gonna watch In Defense of Che Guevara, How the Media Lies to You by Overzealots. Y'all ready to blast off? Let's blast off.
Of videos calling him a murderer, psychopath, homophobe, racist, and so on.
You're wearing a mass murderer's t-shirt.
He personally murdered or had murdered thousands of Cuban citizens.
Oh, brother, this guy.
It's like walking around, again, with a Stalin t-shirt.
There exists very few well-thought-out rebuttals to these claims on this website. The videos on the screen right now are really good in my opinion, but they're unfortunately drowned out by the slander. I get a lot of comments from people who are curious as to why I keep a portrait of a supposed tyrannical mass-murdering bigot in my living room, especially since I emphasize democracy so much in my videos, and that's because he's not a mass murderer. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to find a single verifiable instance of him killing even one innocent person. The lack of knowledge when it comes to Che Guevara is evident. There are countless YouTube historians who can't even get the dude's birthday right, yet somehow feel the need to fill you in on the truth about Che Guevara.
Ernesto Che Guevara was born June 14th, 1928 in Rosario, Argentina.
Yes, although Wikipedia will tell you that his birthday was June 14th, his actual birthday was a month earlier, on May 14th. We know this because the most acclaimed biography on Che, written by John Lee Anderson, explains how Che's own mother admitted this fact to an astrologer on the literal first page of the book. If you're gonna make a truth about Che Guevara video, don't you think you should at least skim what is considered to be one of the most significant pieces written about the man? I don't bring this up to be pedantic. Anderson is such an important journalist on the topic of Guevara that he is credited with literally helping to find Che's remains after 30 years. He might be worth the read. This may seem like a small detail I'm obsessing over, but it's emblematic of the greater lack of respect for this topic, so In this video, I'll take the 3 big accusations levied against Guevara, that he was a mass murderer, racist, and a homophobe, and refute each claim. Was Che Guevara a murderer? Well, the good folks over at PragerU sure seem to think so. They also like to draw Che as though he was a brown person for some reason, even though he was a white dude with Irish and Spanish ancestry. I guess drawing the guy with a darker complexion while trying to paint him as a terrorist plays well with their conservative base. Anyway, for those unfamiliar with Guevara's story, he was born into a well-off family in Argentina with a bad case of asthma. He was very bright and he studied to become a doctor. When he was in his early 20s, he and his friend decided to go on a trip from Argentina all the way up to North America so they could experience the world around them. On this trip, Che saw the immense suffering and poverty in Latin America, and he understood the culprit to be US corporations and imperialism that looted the lands and marginalized the indigenous peoples. He even witnessed the US-led
Team Asthma real quick.
overthrow of democratically elected Guatemalan president Jacobo Arbenz because American corporations wanted to continue expropriating Guatemalan land and fruit. This trip radicalized Che and ultimately led to his involvement in the overthrow of the US-backed Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista in 1959. Che played a pivotal role in the Cuban Revolution alongside Fidel Castro and the rest of his rebel army. Now, before I go any further, this video is not about Fidel. A lot of people like to conflate the two men when discussing Che's record and argue that since they perceive Fidel to be a terrible, evil man, then it must follow that Che was too. Apart from the fact that Fidel's story is nuanced and shouldn't be touched on as a side note, Che and Fidel were very different people. Fidel wasn't even a communist at the time of the revolution. He actually stacked his new government with relatively conservative people in the attempt to placate the hostile USA. Yes, many mistakes were made by Fidel in the years that followed the revolution, and yes, a lot of them were in response to the US invasion, bombing, and embargo of his country. But for the sake of brevity, this video will focus on Che. Similarly, there are bad faith actors who like to conflate Che with the Cuban state itself and attribute any wrongdoing committed by the state to Che. Every country has its own flawed history in some way. We're not going to blame Guevara for Cuba's unless he was directly involved. Back to this very well done and totally not dishonest PragerU video. As you can see, they are kind enough to link us to a source document, which I happily clicked through in the hopes of finding some new and damning information on Che. As I dealt with the source material and tried to trace the claims back to their original sources, it did not take me long before I arrived at cubaarchive.org. If you've ever had a conversation with someone set on convincing you that Che was a mass murderer, they might have told you to check out this site. I know a lot of op-eds on the topic like to use Cuba Archive as a source, like this HuffPost article. Researchers have documented 216 victims of Che Guevara in Cuba from 1957 to 1959. Wow, I gotta check this out. Oh nice, an Error 404 page. That's some good-ass journalism right there. In almost every slanderous article or blog post I read on the topic of Guevara, any definitive claim that Che killed X amount of people would redirect me to Cuba Archive, specifically this 404 error page. Now, this is obviously a dead end. The page was taken down for some reason, probably due to blatant dishonesty, but as I researched this topic further, I'm almost certain that this page is the one being debunked in a 4-year-old video by a YouTuber called Bad Empanada, where he goes in depth on the topic and does a really good job highlighting how dishonest Cuba Archive can be. I definitely recommend you check it out if you want more on this topic. As of 2025, Cuba Archive is still home to a database that lists the names and cases of people who died or disappeared under both Batista and Castro's rule, which on its face seems like a useful tool that could help us to further understand the severity of the issue at hand, until we very quickly see that this database is filled with dishonesty and misappropriations of their very own source material. Not to mention, citing Cuba Archive, a database that covers deaths and disappearances committed by the Cuban state since 1952, doesn't necessarily fill you in on whether or not Che Guevara was the culprit. But to illustrate my point about the misinformation prevalent on this website, let's look at the case of a man who we know for certain Che personally killed because he wrote about it in his diaries. Killed, not murdered. There is a difference, and it's an important one, and we'll get into the distinction in a bit. This is a case that is often used when trying to paint Che as a mass murderer because it's the one instance of a killing that we can actually confirm with a primary source. Eutemio Guerra, Cuba Archive states, was a peasant and rebel army member executed on charges of being a Batista government informant by Che himself. And the source they quote for this is, oh, would you look at that? It's John Lee Anderson's biography. Well, luckily for us, we have a copy of Anderson's book, so we can get that much-needed context directly from the source. Eutimio Guerra was, in fact, a peasant who joined the rebel army to fight against Batista, but he betrayed the rebels and collaborated with the enemy. This led to the rebel army's location being compromised and bombed, and it even led to the death of a rebel guerrilla. It's important.
So he was a snitch. How surprising that the snitch has some bad feelings towards the person he snitched on.
To note that treason and betrayal was known to bring a death sentence. That much was made clear before joining the rebels. When Eutimio was captured by the rebels, they found an army safe conduct pass bearing his name and proving he collaborated with the enemy. Eutimio didn't even try to ask for clemency because he was well aware of his crimes and he
knew he was an
knew that the punishment for treachery was death. Eutimio got down on his knees, asking that he be shot to have it over with. Now, instead of just brazenly executing him on the spot the way a mass murderer would have no problem doing, Che and the rebels conducted a makeshift trial for Eutimio. They were in the middle of a guerrilla war, so they had to make do with what they could, but he was given a trial nonetheless. Even Cuba Archive nonchalantly admits this. Fidel ultimately gave the order to execute the man who betrayed the army and led to the death of a fellow rebel, and Che, only after seeing that nobody else wanted to carry out the execution, did so. Now you tell me if that constitutes murder. Murder is a legal term encompassing the unlawful killing of an innocent person. This is obviously a tragic story, but murder is not the...
You know what? I'm not even gonna hold you. That's probably something I know like on a Snapple bottle cap, but kind of is an important distinction. That murder in and of itself murder does not happen to guilty people. Murder is not for guilty people. Like, you murder a person, I guess this means like, yeah, because like murder and self-defense isn't really a thing. It's just called self-defense or yeah, I think murder is the intentional killing of an innocent person, because the unintentional killing of an innocent person is manslaughter.
Appropriate word to use. Otherwise, we would have to turn to other nations like the US, who also consider treason to be punishable by death and consider that practice to be murderous as well. It's very clear that a lot of nuance is stripped away from this case if you just read the Cuba Archive page on it. Like I said, Che's detractors like to publicize the story of Eutimio Guerra because it's the only confirmed case of Che personally killing someone. Like this hit piece written by Alvaro Vargas Llosa that reads, "Guevara shot Eutimio Guerra because he suspected him of passing on information." We can see that the author is using vague language here to make Che seem unreasonable. Llosa leaves out the fact that the rebels found an army-safe conduct pass proving definitively that Eutimio was guilty. Little tricks like this are played all over Cuba Archive's database as well. To really drive this home, Guerra betrayed the rebels, colluded with the enemy in a way that led to the death of a rebel guerrilla, was captured, admitted his wrongdoings, asked for death, was given a trial, and was executed for treason. This is not some act of sadistic depravity that Che took pleasure in carrying out. Cuba Archive will touch on similar cases where the rebels, sometimes acting on Che's command, were forced to carry out similar executions of traitors, criminals, and Batista collaborators, and although Cuba Archive uses very ambiguous language describing what happened, I implore you to actually seek out the source material that they use, and you will quickly realize that they often bastardize their own sources to make it seem as though Che was walking around murdering innocent people. His victims, if you could even call them that, were often murderers and torturers of peasants, enemy combatants, or traitors who collaborated with the enemy and compromised the rebels.
Y'all know what this reminds me of? Every time I hear Republican senators say, we're trying to do X to protect victims, like, I know we all know this, but like, I just have this real sick feeling in my stomach knowing that like they think, like in their head, they're like the victims are the men that are gonna have their reputations tarnished because they unsuccessfully were trying to commit crimes. You know, do y'all ever think about that?
Which would bring a death sentence in the US as well. It's sad to see Che's detractors hyper-focus on such shoddy evidence regarding his supposed mass murder sprees when we have verifiable instances of his work in establishing hospitals, administering medical aid to people, teaching people how to read and write in the effort to combat illiteracy, being an outspoken critic of horrific regimes like that of apartheid South Africa, which we'll get into later in this video when discussing his supposed racism, and more. But for now, let's move on to the main point of contention for those who paint Che as a mass murderer: his work overseeing the Cuban tribunals after the Batista regime fell. After the revolution was won and the dictator Fulgencio Batista fled the country, a lot of Batista's army men, police, and collaborators remained in Cuba, and like any other war criminals, needed to be tried in tribunals. It's important to note that Batista's rule was genuinely brutal. His forces were guilty of acts so depraved that I can't even mention them in this video. He treated the Cuban population horrendously, with atrocities ranging from torture to mutilation to mass murder. CIA records confirm this and, surprisingly, juxtapose Batista's tyrannical rule with
It is estimated that roughly, It is estimated that roughly 20,000 politically inspired murderers and death during revolutionary actions occurred during Batista's last term in office, March 10th, 52 to December 31st, 58. However, no accurate estimate is possible. Most of these deaths took place during 57 to 58 as Castro's revolutionary threat became progressively more potent and had the Batista regime sought to counter it with a campaign of terror. As regime-inspired terrorism mounted, anti-Batista groups engaged in counterterrorism against regime supporters, and by mid-1958, killings had become widespread and general throughout the country. The regime's campaign of terror got out of control, and the government in Havana probably had no clear idea of how many killings the police and army forces were committing. Jesus. Similarly, the anti-Batista forces, which by mid-1958 had the support of 80 to 90% of the population, the anti-Batista forces, I'm repeating, had little control over the acts of counterterrorism being committed against pro-Batista elements throughout the country. So it was a free-for-all, basically, right? The estimate of 20,000 deaths for political reasons during the Batista era includes only a relatively small number killed in actual military encounters between Batista-Castro forces. Yeah, so this brings a lot like, I don't know, like the Rwandan genocide, maybe?
Castro's comparatively sensible one. Quote, "The large-scale campaigns of murders and terrorism characteristic of the last years of the Batista regime have not occurred during the Castro regime." Again, this is not me playing defense for any atrocities that may have occurred under Castro. It just feels like it would be relevant to share what the CIA was saying at the time. It is funny how Cuba had an actual mass-murdering despot at its helm for so many years, yet conservative media rarely brings it up. Castro put Che in charge of trying the war criminals, rapists, murderers, and torturers from the Batista regime. This entailed Che going over their cases and issuing a sentence. This could be compared to any other tribunal. In Che's case, suspected war criminals were brought to La Cabana, a fortress he used as a headquarters and military prison. Those suspected of atrocities, often involving the torture of peasants, sexual abuses, and murders, had their cases looked over by Che and other members tasked with presiding over the tribunals. His work at this fortress has earned Che the nickname, the Butcher of La Cabana, by those who like to misrepresent his legacy and paint him as a careless mass murderer who killed everyone who was brought to him. But the historical record begs to differ. Orlando Borrego, the accountant who administered La Cabana's finances and fellow tribunal president, had this to say about the trials. "Our paramount concern was to ensure that revolutionary morality and justice prevailed. Che was very careful. Nobody was shot for hitting a prisoner, but if there was extreme torture and killings and death, then yes, they were condemned to death. The whole case was analyzed, all the witnesses seen, and the relatives of the dead or tortured person came, or the tortured person himself." In addition to this, Anderson reports that Che never attended the trials or met with defendants himself as to not jeopardize the legal process and intertwine personal vendettas with justice.
One thing you can trust is the perspective of an accountant, because they're boring. But also, like, I don't know if this is a time or place to necessarily talk about, like, what war is, but I suppose for what it's worth, this is the other side of what Republicans are always trying, or conservatives or war hawks are always trying to bait us with, in saying like, hey, in the fog of war, anything happens. No, not anything happens. Your constitution doesn't go away just because it's war. Your humanity doesn't have to dissolve just because of bloodshed. In fact, that can show you who the actual good guys are, isn't it? The ones that keep their morals, or fighting for a more just world, and therefore are not saying this is the opportunity for me to be immoral because the ends justify the means, but like, because I believe in this new version of the world, I'm going to excise that which does not serve it. But I believe in forgiveness for those, and redemption for those to which, like, they were simply part of, they were simply drugged to the system and not the perpetrators of it. And that goes to what we're talking about today, right? Like, I feel like I have so many conversations with people that maybe aren't as not as online as I am, maybe not as progressive as I am, but they're liberal, or maybe some of them are moderate. And I often feel like I'm having this conversation where it's like, hey, what's good, Julian? Bro, you missed it. I made a whole Maduro beat EP. It's crazy. Anthony Fantano came on live, like, off the random shit, was in the comments, said he was giving it like a hard 6. But like, I was cool with the opportunity. Not fucking with you. We're learning about Cuba today. Cuba and I think Venezuela after this. And I'm not gonna hold you guys, I completely forgot where my point was going because I got so excited that Julian hopped in the live. So blame either one of us. It'll be anti-black either way.
He just went over the cases with his fellow judges and reached a verdict on the basis of evidence alone. Borrego also mentioned that Che took great care in selecting the judges and prosecutors, and that the rebels who were mistreated were not allowed to pass judgment on their former torturers. He went on to talk about how there were people and prosecutors who would superfluously ask for the death sentence, but they would be frequently moderated by Che and his colleagues. So yes, there were trials and executions during this period in Cuba, but according to John Lee Anderson, these trials were above board, if summary affairs, with defense lawyers, witnesses, prosecutors, and an attending public. But there was also a number of arbitrary executions. The most notorious incident occurred when, soon after occupying Santiago, Raul Castro directed a mass execution of more than 70 captured soldiers. Raul's reputation for ruthlessness was confirmed. Now, those with a keen eye might be able to pick up on the fact that Raul Castro is actually not Che Guevara. Those are different people. Anderson goes on to say there was little overt public oppositions to the workings of revolutionary justice. On the contrary, Batista's thugs had committed some sickening crimes, and the Cuban public was in a lynching mood. Che warned his judges to be scrupulous about weighing the evidence in each case so as not to give the revolution's enemies additional ammunition, but the trials had to continue if Cuba's revolution...
Right, which is just common sense, right? Like, inevitably, we did do a war. We did have a battle. And there are people here who think the battle is not over. So we would definitely want to start the country on a new page, but we do not want to, because we are actually here for a better world and we're not just here just to assume power, we do not want to continue the cycle of violence and sins of the father our way into another fucking civil war. So yeah, maybe the demos right now might be a little antsy, they got a lot to get off their chest, but it is the job of the vanguard in this particular situation to moderate so that the success of the revolution can be, like, as the author says, secure, but and to establish, like, this new status quo, but not go overboard with it, France, to start another revolution, right?
Was to be secure. In a book by Paco Ignacio Taibo called Guevara, also known as Che, Taibo says this about the trials. Without a doubt, Che was in favor of the summary trials, but the tales woven by Cuban exiles, in which he was the butcher of La Cabana presiding over most of the shootings in Havana, are flights of fantasy. Revolutionary Tribunals number 1 and number 2 did sit at La Cabana, the first trying policemen and soldiers, the second, which did not pass death sentences, trying civilians. I really want to emphasize that. The tribunals tasked with dishing out civilian sentences did not condemn non-combatants.
So low-key, I might be inflammatory for saying this, but like, was Shay giving the blueprint for like how to eat the rich? Like how to, because so far this is conceptually what I feel like we're talking about when we're saying like this is what we want to do when we prosecute those who are in power. We will have to prosecute the whole system, like those soldiers and the generals and those administrative people. Like they will need to be held accountable for their actions, because we need to instill the spirit that that whole thing was washed, that whole thing was not okay. But the only people I want to see severely reprimanded are the people that pushed are the people that had the power of the pen, are the people that had the authorization power, and everyone else is going to receive several degrees lower of a punishment from that.
To death.
Shay sent many people, even the innocent, to their deaths.
Now, before you accuse me of using evil Marxist sources, Taibo's book was cited as a source on that Cuba archive entry on Guerrero that we covered earlier. I'm using the same sources used by a website dead set on framing Che as the devil. To add to this, in a forum with PBS, John Lee Anderson said, "I have yet to find a single credible source pointing to the case where Che executed an innocent. Those persons executed by Guevara or on his orders were condemned for the usual crimes punishable by death at times of war or in its aftermath: desertion, treason, or crimes such as rape, torture, or murder." I should add that my research spanned 5 years and included anti-Castro Cubans among the Cuban-American exile community in Miami and elsewhere. From what we can tell, Che was far from a careless murderer. He actually seemed to be very cognizant and fair. This is not to say that he was a perfect man who did everything right with no room for improvement. I'm not trying to glaze too close to the sun, but these were incredibly stressful and unique conditions, and the evidence supporting the claim that Che was a ruthless and bloodthirsty murderer is weak. Was Che racist? Another claim that is often levied against Che is that he was a bigot. This is often used as a gotcha by conservatives who like to point out what they perceive to be the hypocrisy of left-leaning people celebrating a supposed bigot. It usually goes like this. Hey, left-wing college kid, you claim to dislike racism and homophobia, but you wear a t-shirt with the image of a racist homophobe on it. I, on the other hand, don't dislike racism or homophobia. I'm quite fond of both, but despite that, I still don't wear a t-shirt with Che Guevara on it because he cared too much for the poor, and that grosses me out. Anyway, my pregnant wife is not going to yell at herself. Gotta go. In all seriousness, there are
This guy stinks.
some accusations of bigotry that can be fairly levied at Che. So let's take a closer look. Starting with the accusation that he was a racist. There are many fake quotes that are wrongfully attributed to Che in the attempt to paint him as a racist. One of which goes, "We're going to do for black people exactly what they did for the revolution," by which I mean nothing. This quote, while damning and definitely racist, can't be definitively traced back to Guevara. It's circulated heavily by Cuban-American conservatives like Humberto Fontava, holy fuck, I killed that pronunciation, I think, who regularly spews outright falsehoods like Che helped to herd gay people into forced labor camps.
Bros just say anything. And I think this might be before the internet. I don't even know. Like, no. Author. Like, that would have shook me. But sometimes the most important word you can say is a 6-letter word. Source?
Which we will debunk later in this video, and Fontava is the source of this banger of a quote. The lily-white Che Guevara and Fidel Castro overthrew the mixed-raced Batista. Is bro trying to imply that Batista's mass murder campaigns were okay because he was mixed race? What kind of identity politics bullshit is this? I refer you back.
Listen, y'all, we all know light makes right. Light makes right. Hey, squirrels in my Kool-Aid. Bring your username.
to the CIA document about Batista's brutality. Also, I have a hard time believing that Fontava gives any semblance of a fuck about racism, considering he collaborated with Bill O'Reilly, who made a litany of unsavory comments regarding race. Fontavo also authored a book about Che, and it's genuinely insane. It's just a really bitter, incoherent polemic that author Rolf Potts referred to as slightly schizophrenic. The Fox article from which I pulled these Fontavo quotes also can't make up its mind on whether or not Che was a racist. Right here it says, many of the people Che was sending to the firing squad were members of Batista's army, and these disproportionately tended to be black and mixed race. Batista himself was mixed race. And then literally 3 black people to be represented in institutions and had black fighters under his command. What are we doing here, guys? However, there is a genuinely racist quote that was written by Che, and it is worth talking about. Remember how I mentioned that Che was born in a well-off white family in Argentina and had a sheltered...
Meaningless pause, but thank you. Maybe I'll do a tour because we like just finished this thing, or like, we as if like I live with some person. Well, I just finished this thing, and also as you guys now can see, I have my Bluetooth headphones, so I'm going to be walking around because this is a neurodivergent friendly stream. And no one is saying they can't hear me yet, which means this is probably working well. Actually, I can check that over here, and it is. That's great. Yeah, we'll do a wall later. Maybe don't mind so much. Hey, don't zoom in on it, niggas. Fuck. Maybe not so much on this one. I stand by it though. I stand by it, but I've been now told by some women that have come into my apartment that I might want to consider. We gonna talk about it. We maybe at one point we'll talk a little bit about the Tyler Creator because I low-key have worse than that. Back to this.
And privileged upbringing. Well, this upbringing came with blind spots. When he was a young man in his early 20s traveling around South America on his motorbike, he kept a personal diary, which is now a famous book called The Motorcycle Diaries. In this book, he wrote a horrific and inexcusably racist passage about black people. It goes like this. The blacks, those magnificent examples of the African race who have maintained their racial purity thanks to their lack of an affinity with bathing, have seen their territory invaded by a new kind of slave, the Portuguese. And the two ancient races have now begun a hard life together, fraught with bickering and squabbles. Discrimination and poverty unite them in the daily fight for survival, but their different ways of approaching life separate them completely. The black is indolent and a dreamer, spending his meager wage on frivolity or drink. The European has a tradition of work and saving, which has pursued him as far as this corner of America and drives him to advance himself. Jesus Christ, yes, this is really bad and indefensible. And the man Che grew to be and the man Che was when he wrote this are very different. In order to fully grasp the context of this quote, we need to understand that this was written by a spoiled rich kid who had...
Okay, so I was right. I was right though. I called that shit from jump. I was like, yeah, he probably was a little racist. He was a rich kid. Like, nigga, I'm Nigerian American, and I grew up working class, and I grew up anti-black because I had Nigerian parents who told me shit that I had to unpack. Really understand, like, my parents were not saying, like, my parents did not actually think we were both black. So they weren't saying it like lovingly, calling in. They thought they were like non-Nigerian blacks were different. So I made no excuses for that shit. That shit was wild. That, bro, in front of my cereal, to be honest, that entire passage. But growth, I'm sure.
Been largely sheltered from any form of intersectional analysis and was extremely racially insensitive. This is a quote from the beginning of his journey, and if you actually read the book, you can see this young 24-year-old grow into a very different man. He met with many indigenous people during his journey and noted how much better he was treated as a white man compared to them. At the end of his journey, he notes that he is no longer the person he was when he embarked on this trip. Quote, "The person who wrote these notes passed away the moment his feet touched Argentine soil again. The person who reorganizes and polishes them, me, is no longer. At least, I am not the person I once was. All this wandering around our great America with a capital A has changed me more than I thought." Clearly a story of growth and self-improvement, yet People like Marco Rubio feel the need to embellish and push a narrative that just isn't true. No, Marco Rubio, Che Guevara did not write extensively about the superiority of white Europeans. In fact, Che's efforts to remedy his disgraceful writings are impressive. In a 1959 letter to William Morris in Miami, Florida, Che Guevara writes, "Esteemed sir, I received your letter to pass on to our commander-in-chief, which I have done. But I would like to say that if any vestiges of racial discrimination remain in this country, our revolution will put a complete end to them. You can be absolutely sure that within a few years, any difference between white and black will be solely a question of skin color, as it should be." It's important to note that the US in 1959 was racist as hell. The Civil Rights Bill had not even passed yet, and the president who ended up passing it, LBJ, referred to it as the N-word bill, but that's a different story. Che was also loudly against apartheid in South Africa, and he even gave a now famous speech on this topic at the UN, where he said, "Once again, we speak out to put the world on guard against what is happening in South Africa. The brutal policy of apartheid is applied before the eyes of the nations of the world. The peoples of Africa are compelled to endure the fact that on the African continent, the superiority of one race over another remains official policy, and that in the name of this racial superiority, murder is committed with impunity. Can the United Nations do nothing to stop this?" He then, in the same speech, went on to detail the crisis inflicted upon the people of Congo and the role of imperialism in the appropriation of their land and resources. He actually cared so much about Congo that he left his post in Cuba, relinquished his Cuban citizenship and all creature comforts that came with it, so he could personally go to the DRC and try to spur revolution. This is not just some guy who overthrew a dictator and then bathed in the glory and lived a comfortable, hedonistic life. For a guy who supposedly wrote extensively about the superiority of white people, as Marco Rubio claims, everything he wrote and did as an adult seems to directly contradict that claim. Was Che homophobic? Similarly to his distasteful comments in regards to race, a young Che Guevara could also be quoted making a definitely homophobic remark about a gay person. He referred to a man as a pervert and then followed up the quote by saying, "Apart from being a homosexual, he had been very nice to us." Yeah, really bad, indefensible, and just like his racist remarks that we touched on earlier, he said this as a young, sheltered, rich kid in the 1950s, and then he grew up. But see, if the conversation started and ended there, I would have no problem conceding the point that Che had said some homophobic shit. He is, after all, just a man, but that's not what his detractors do. They go on to say that he rounded up gay people and forced them into concentration camps after the Cuban Revolution. Some dishonest actors go as far as to claim that he murdered people for being gay.
Che Guevara executed gays, right? This is a guy, if when you wear a Che Guevara shirt, you're wearing a Hitler who was less successful in being charismatic and duping people.
Now, this is just blatantly untrue. There is no verifiable record of Che killing people for their sexuality. What is often being referred to when people make this point is the UMAP system in Cuba. The UMAPs were military units to aid production, and people who opted out of military service had to serve their country in a different way, and they were sent to these forced labor camps. At the time, gay people were not allowed to serve in the Cuban military, the same way they weren't allowed to serve in any other country's military, and they were subjected to forced labor in these Cuban camps. It is worth noting that draft dodgers in the US were sent to prison, where the 13th Amendment turned them into literal slaves, but that's another story. Yes, the UMAPs were despicable and unjustifiable. No, just because the Americans did similar shit does not make it okay. There are also reports of gay people being mistreated and abused in these camps. It undoubtedly was really inexcusably bad, considering Fidel Castro felt the need to issue an apology for this dark period in Cuban history, saying, "If anyone is responsible, it's me." The dreaded UMAP system ran from November 1965 to July of 1968. 3 years too long, if you ask me. But again, this video is not about the Cuban state. It's about Che Guevara. So, what was he doing during this time? Oh yeah, he was in Congo. In April of 1965, Che relinquished his Cuban citizenship and left the country to spread revolution abroad. He left Cuba 3 months before the UMAPs were established. In a farewell letter to Fidel, written by Che on April 1st, 1965.
On April Fool's Day, no less. I don't know if that was a thing back then. But he said, "I'm really just in love with the game." Bro said, on that straight Luffy shit, actually. He said, "John, none." He said, I don't know what we celebrating. Job not done. On to the next one. How do you not respect that? I don't know.
He says, I formally resign my positions in the leadership of the party, my post as minister, my rank of commander, and my Cuban citizenship. Nothing legally binds me to Cuba. The only ties are of another nature, those that cannot be broken, as can appointments to posts. Che died 2 years after writing this in 1967, and the UMAPs ended in 1968. During their runtime, Che was in Congo, and then Bolivia, and then he was killed. He had nothing to do with them. Now, could Che have done more to stick up for LGBT rights in Cuba, especially during a period of machismo and ignorance towards gay people? Yeah, I'm sure he could have, and that would have been cool as fuck. But again, this was the 1960s. That doesn't make it right. Homophobia was never right, but apart from a single homophobic passage written when he was in his early 20s, he was 24, Che was not this raging homophobe who rounded up gay people and threw them into camps or killed them. That just isn't true. In summary, in his youth, Che wrote racist and homophobic things. We know he grew out of his racism as his later actions showed. We can't say for certain whether or not he grew out of his homophobia, but we could infer that as he matured and became a Marxist, he rid himself of these bigoted ideas and focused on solidarity. There are no actions or writings from his adult life that suggest that he was a horrific homophobe, but without new evidence, we'll never know for sure. It's not uncommon to meet people who hate Che and the Cuban government for.
I think very importantly, like if you can't hold space for that type of arc or that type of personal journey, we're not in the same progressive camp. To be honest with you, like I'm not gonna glaze Che off of one man's video or anything like that, or even off of like stories I've been told both from the mainstream media and from people that that are Marxist. But what I can stand for is the generally agreed upon story that that Che Guevara was a man who, as he learned more of the world, changed his mind, and the ways in which he switched his positions were pro-social and pro-human. I do think a North Star for me, and when I say North Star, I mean like I strive towards it, but my daily challenge is finding out where, if my boundary is too far or too short, but is rooting for people, or at the minimum holding space for people who have grown, right? To see that as something that is not only a positive, but also that might be more rare than I think. It might be underappreciated. And to say that, like, okay, no, I recognize that as, let's say, a feather in your cap.
For anecdotal reasons. I have people close to me who lived in Cuba under Fidel and they really loved him, but that's why we don't use anecdotes and we stick to empiricism. History is not made up of great, infallible people. It's made up of people reacting to their environments and material realities. There's no such thing as a perfect person, but I agree with Jean-Paul Sartre when he said that Che Guevara was the most complete human being of our age.
All right, we learned about some Che. We learned about some Che Guevara. Actually, low key. Yeah, I should have put on the sources one instead. But now that this is up, I kind of like want to finish this Stokely Carmichael lecture. Don't even really have. Oh, I lost it. Wait, where'd you go? Come back. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, I didn't know I could do that. That's cool. Okay, don't be annoying about it though. Okay. Wait, does that mean I could See, yeah, that's what I wanted to do before. Okay, got you. Don't. Okay, I'm staying on topic. I'm staying on topic. Don't even really have to like the person to respect and support most of what he was doing. I just, yeah. Shout out for you for still coming. But yeah, that's how I feel. Right. In 2026, I'm dropping pretense. I'm dropping a lot of pretense, and I'm trusting that I can speak through any communication gaps without needlessly needing to know every fucking thing to assert like a basic truth or like a basic assumption about someone. I think it's cool when you fight for the underprivileged and you win. And the things that happen en route to that, I observe as the pros and cons of a reality that I wish to bring to fruition. Moral people are getting moral ambiguity. Wow. I swear to God, English is my first language. Please do not deport me. People do kind of suck at moral ambiguity. They're getting straight D's in that bitch. And to be fair, this is the country founded on puritanical values. So we are literally the whole reason this experiment exists is because there were people that were too religious in fucking Britain or Europe or whatever the fuck, and they decided to have their cult here. So kind of sucks we couldn't have a cult that was all based on, I don't know, like providing people like free healthcare and like loving your neighbor and treating your neighbor as your brother. We really wish like the cult would have been about that, but apparently it's not. Weird. Okay, we got like 6 minutes because I gotta go to I'm going to take my dad to Roost Chris because he retired on Friday. He worked for the district for over like 30 years, and it's finally retired. So y'all got about 5 minutes to ask me whatever you want, and here I am for you. Hopefully, it's how I close out most of the streams, to be honest, because maybe I finally have done enough stuff to be interesting enough to ask questions about. But yeah, let's just chill for these last 5 minutes. If y'all want to talk about anything, I'm not talking about anything, and then we'll go ahead and close this out. Really liked how the stream turned out though. Like, how are y'all like the new format, the new software? Like, hold up, it's like first of all, this bitch follow me. Whoa. And then, you know, this bitch over here is the little cutie over here in perspective. Hold on, can I change the perspective in front of you guys? What do I have it on? 86. Ooh, yeah. I like exactly where that before. So yeah, we're like vibing now. Shout out to everybody that has come. Shout out to shout out once again to Pissed Off Christoph for the super chat. Please, if you would like to follow his lead, this is the one time when being a follower is actually so is so good. Yo, you're wilding for that. Wait, where is it? You're wilding for that, Spinoli. I'm just happy your camera focuses on you and not the wall behind you. Please have a will. Listen, but like the thing is, what I respect about Will's setup, because I have talked to him about this, is that ultimately it's part of the package now. You know, like that's how you stay closer to culture, by making sure you never put too much distance between you and the culture. Me, unfortunately, I'm bougie. I know I'm never gonna be accepted by the culture. Even though I grew up where I grew up, I sound like this. I use words like torpor and ambiguity. So I'm not trying. I do want this camera quality to get to get up to that level. You know, we might get 4K one day, but I don't be talking about the streets. I don't be talking about the barbershop. And I feel like if I saw Lil Bill in 4K, if I saw the reflection of my face inside of his bald head, it would feel more propagandistic. Does that make sense? A lot of leftists will often be good people, but if they were part of Team Avatar, then Aang would never learn firebending because they tell Zuko to fuck off and use Starburst. Facts, Oxpecker. Like a lot of them not gonna hear you. A lot of them not gonna hear you right now. Some of them is in the chat right now, and a lot of them not really hearing you because they're like, oh no, like I wouldn't do that because Zuko is hot, basically, or Zuko would have been nice. Like, no, it's that burnt tough feet that get y'all every time because that's your heart, and that like I don't want you to lose that. But these shows, their purpose is to say, hey, look at the bigger picture and understand why we are flexible in our understanding of people, because sometimes you need to bet a little bit. You need to bet a little bit of goodwill in order to get a lot of good faith out of it. Actually, opposite way around. Bet a little bit of good faith to get a lot of goodwill out of it. Nah, you cook with that though, Pecker. You cook with that. They definitely would have been like, really? So you're just gonna let, like, he's literally a colonizer. Like, not 3 months ago, he literally called you the hard R, like a waterbender. Like, it, come on, bro. Like, I'm not gonna lie, Aang, you kind of cooning right now. Didn't his family kill your entire bloodline? And you're gonna take that? Like, they would have gaslit the hell out of him. Where I get my cat from? Great question. Thrift store. Like 2nd Avenue. Yeah, this is definitely. I pick up most of my hats from thrift stores. It's been forever since I put this back on, because like you can see, I clearly have no kind of grooming right now. But also, I realized my hair's finally getting back to that length when I should be able to start braiding it again. So I'm trying to enjoy the fact that I can still wear hats a little longer, because I didn't realize, like, when I got my locks, just how much, like, why would I wear hats? I only ever wore hats because I don't like the shape of my head. And I didn't have long hair. So yeah, sorry, Julian, I can't. But if you ever do come to the DMV, I will hook you up. We'll go thrift shopping. We'll get you. Most memorable lesson on 2025. Buy the dip. Buy the dip. That is, how much time do we have? All right, I'm already over, so I gotta get out of here. That's a great way to end it. This is going into the ether, which is that's presence. Thank you guys for being present with me, honestly, for the past 2 hours, because I didn't record this. To be fair, YouTube probably doesn't keep it up, so it'll probably stay up for like the rest of the day, and then probably gonna delete this. Maybe it ends up on the second channel if like there's a very easy way to do it, but if there's not, it's just whatever. I just want to see if this is gonna work out. I'm loving the way that it's looking. Loving the fact that people still come out to see me. We got about 40 likes on this, as well as I think we hit like 20-25 people max in the room. So you guys stay blessed. You guys learn more about Cuba. No, but you guys be well. See you guys on Tuesday for Tayo Tuesday. And as always, be kind.